right, let's talk real briefly. I don't know if it'll be brief or not, but let's talk about some workarounds for bar chords. I think everybody should learn to play bar chords, but it's a real challenge for some people because of maybe the size of their hands or the strength of their grip, or maybe the strings on the guitar are particularly heavy. And if you have to play a song and you haven't mastered bar chords yet, what can you do to get around it? From another perspective, I can play bar chords, but I actually don't choose them very often. Most of the time I will choose a voicing that does not require a bar chord. So here's some of the things that I use instead of bar chords. So I'm sure you're already familiar with the G, C2, D or D suspended, E minor 7 arrangement. Now what's nice about these chord voicings is they go really well together in the key of G. It requires very small movements from one chord to another. You have two anchor fingers right here on the high two strings, and then you only move, there's your G, there's your C, there's your D sus, or you could pick that up and make it a D, and there's your E minor 7. You only have to move two strings. So there are three reasons I can think of for picking particular chord voicings. And the most important one is how it sounds. The second most important one is how easy it is to get to from another chord that you're using. And then the third one would be how easy it is to play in a given context. So in the key of G, those are great. Now, interesting thing about that key is that we probably didn't actually choose the C2, or more technically the C add 9. We probably didn't choose it for the sound. We probably chose it because it's easy in this context. And the sound is fine. And the sound ends up being kind of a signature of the chord voicing. But we chose it really for convenience, and we're fine with the sound. And that's what we're going to do on several of these other chords that I'm going to show you. So the key of G isn't too hard for a lot of people. It's when we get into the key of C and we have to bust out an F chord. That F chord is a real challenge for a lot of people. So I'm going to show you how I do an F chord in the key of C under most circumstances, and I avoid bar chords. So in a beginning learning guitar songbook, they might show you a 3-finger version of an F, or a 3-string version, I'm sorry, or perhaps like this. And that's fine. It's just a really high voicing, a really narrow voicing, and we would like to have some more width. So the barred version gives us the full-bodied chord, but that requires a bar with this finger, which can be a real challenge. So what I do, probably 9 times out of 10 when I'm playing an F chord, is I use this. And this is 4 strings, but there's a good spread between the low and the high, so it gives a very full voicing. And I use only my fingertips, so I get good tone out of it, and I don't have to muscle out a bar chord. So what I'm doing here, let me show you this relative to the related C chord. So here's a traditional 3-finger C. We're using the 3rd fret on the A string, the 2nd fret on the D string, and the 1st fret on the B string. There's a C. And with that C, it's important that you don't play the low E unless it's called for. So you leave that one out, and we just play 5 strings. And to get an F very easily out of this without requiring a bar, you put your pinky down here on that D string, 3rd fret, and you move the, what is that, it's not my ring finger, my middle finger, sorry, you move the middle finger from the D string to the G string. And that's an F. And if you only play the 4 middle strings, then it's a pretty good F with no extra funky notes in it, and it's easy to get to from a C. So here's C, here's F, C, F. That's even easier than the... Now, a A couple notes to think about on this. If you go ahead and leave the high E string in open, you get a very nice F major 7. And in some contexts, maybe the chord sheet calls for an F, but an F major 7 will work. Just do that. Otherwise, if you don't want that major 7 note in there, just don't strum that low string or that high string. If you're particular about it, or just by accident this works too, you can let your pointer finger mute that high E string. So, not gonna get that note in there. And then if you want it in, all you have to do is play that extra string. So there's F major 7, there's F without the major 7, and all I did was mute it a little bit with that finger. Okay, now the cool thing about that F chord is in the key of C, we're also going to want a G chord usually, and so if we go C, F, getting to a G from here is kind of awkward. You can go up and get that G, but that required me to move all of my fingers a lot. You can also do this version of a G, which doesn't require as much motion, but getting that pinky down there, getting that big of a spread is a challenge for a lot of people. So by far the easiest way to get to a G in this key is just to take that F chord and move it up 2 frets. And do the same thing. Don't play the bottom E string, don't play the high E string, just play these 4 notes. And you get a broad enough chord voicing, particularly in the context of a full band or praise and worship music, and it works quite easily. So C, F, G. Now, the music theory nerd might point out that that's actually a second inversion of the F or the G, and it is, and that's fine. If you've got a bass guitarist playing, you don't play the bass note anyway. He's controlling which inversion it is, so just do what comes easy. So that's a pretty good approach to the key of C, but I'll show you another way to approach an F. So the full bar chord is like this. And I'm going to do just a slight variation of that, where instead of having to mash my pointer finger down on all 6 strings, I'm only going to use the fingertip on the low E string. And then I'm just straight up not going to play the 2 highest strings. So there's an F chord. Now that's if you need to hit the bassier end of the F. If you don't need that low end F, then just use this. But if you need that low end, use this, and just have an attack with your pick that only gets those lowest 4 strings. And then that can easily be moved up here to a G. And just to make sure you know how I'm playing this, I'm using these 3 fingers to make an E chord, and then just moving it up. G. And that allows me to use my fingertips and still not have to make a bar, but still get a full voiced F. That gives you all of the 3 important intervals in the F. Gives you the root, the 3rd, and the 5th, as well as an octave. Now, interestingly, let's switch to a different chord. Some people use that same concept in the key of E, but they go ahead and play the open strings, and you get some really nice voicings in the key of E. So this is your E chord, and if you use this for an A chord and you just leave the 2 high strings open, you actually get an A2 or an A add 9, and then use this for a B chord, and that's technically a B suspended. But if you see chord sheets that are written for E, A2, and B suspended, that's what they're doing. They also might play the A2 like this, and the B suspended like this, and the E like this. But no matter which of those voicings they're using, when the chord sheet is written for E, A2, and B suspended, they are leaving those 2 high strings completely open. No bar chords. So E, A2, B suspended. So it's nice to know that that voicing is typical, so you don't feel compelled to do some difficult sort of B bar chord. E, A, B. Okay, now let's talk about the key of D. So in the key of D, B minor is an important chord, and B minor is traditionally played with a bar. But you don't have to. You can do exactly that same sort of fingering I used up here on the F or the G. You can move it down a string and put it on the 2nd fret, and now you have a B minor. And if you only play those 4 middle strings, the 2nd fret of the A string, 4th fret of the D string, 4th fret of the G string, 3rd fret of the B string, if you only play those 4 notes, you get a fairly wide-voiced B minor, but you didn't have to make a bar. Now, you have to watch out for this high E string, and just like in the F that I showed you over here, that high E string, you can leave it in, which gives you a B minor suspended, or you can just avoid playing it, or you can kind of let your pointer finger mute it a little bit and not worry about it. So in the key of D, rather than bar chords, just do like D, A, B minor. That is not a barred B minor. I mean, it kind of looks like a bar, but I'm really only playing with my fingertip. And if you wanted to throw in a G, because G is also in the key of D, you could move all 3 of these fingers up to here. That would be one way to get a G, and that would be fine. Or you could just pick this up exactly like this and move it up a string and up a fret, and there's that G I showed you earlier. So D, A, B minor, G. Okay, another thought in the key of D, if this was our C chord, you can take that whole traditional C chord and move it up 2 frets, and it becomes a little unusual of a D. It's actually a D suspended, add 9, but it works in a lot of contexts. It has a really interesting flavor for it, and it's a little bit harder to leave out the inappropriate notes there, so you mostly just use it where those notes are fine. But the nice thing about that chord is that's easy to get to from this G. Just like we did C, F here, we can do D, G, D, G. And as long as you don't mind the 4 and the 9 or the 2 in there, that works pretty nicely. So D minor, or sorry, that's a D major. D, A, B, G, D, B minor. And if you notice, I did all of those voicings without any bars. That B minor thrown in at the end was a little bit of a tricky one. I don't think I'll explain that there. Oh, sure I will. It's only these 3 strings. So it's really a B minor 2nd inversion. But it does give me, here's the 5th, the root, and the 3rd. And it doesn't require any bars. It does require a little bit more precision in the pick attack, since you're only playing 3 strings. All right, last thing is power chords. And power chords are traditionally thought of as an electric guitar thing, but there's no reason you can't use them on an acoustic guitar. I have a friend that led worship for many years using nothing but power chords, and while nobody would accuse him of being a brilliant guitarist, it got the job done quite effectively. So a power chord is very similar to a bar chord, except that you can just use your fingertips. And with a power chord, there is no 3rd. So it is the root, the 5th, and the octave. And so that would be played like an F, root, 5th, octave. And I'm not making any bars. I'm using only fingertips. I can only play these low 3 strings, but if we're okay with that sound, then a power chord works really well. And that particular fingering works for an F or an F minor. So F, G, A minor, and is very portable. So that sort of sound gets used in a lot of electric guitar, rock music, or punk music, or whatever that might require a lot of fast movements, and therefore being able to slide very quickly is very handy. Now, if you're not moving around as fast, it still is a fairly effective way to get a chord in, especially if you run into some sort of a unusual chord where there just really isn't a good open voicing for it, like for instance a B flat. B flat is, yeah, there's no good open voicing for B flat, so you can just do it on the A string. So first fret on the A string, third fret on the D string, third fret on the G string, and you can throw that B flat in there. Or you could do it up here on the E string. So if you're in the key of F and you're trying to avoid bar chords, so there's the 1, the 4, 5, F, B flat, C. 1, 4. Or if you were to play that with all power chords, it would be 1, 4, 5. Or 1, 4, 5. So, okay, one more idea I have. A D over F sharp is not a bar chord, but it is a challenge for a lot of people unless you have large hands. So the large hand folks often play the D over F sharp just by wrapping their thumb around. And I might do that occasionally, particularly in a finger pick context. But generally I don't use my thumb like that. So what I often do when I'm asked to play the D over F sharp is I leave out this high E string, and so then I might play my D over F sharp like this, which technically would be a D2 over F sharp, but if you just don't strike that high E string, then it's still just a normal D over F sharp. And that works fairly well with a G chord. So if this is your G, then you can leave these two fingers down and move your pointer finger up here to the F sharp and your middle finger to the second fret of the G string, and pick the pinky up or don't. So you can have G, D over F sharp, and usually it's a walk down to an E minor, or in this case technically it's an E minor 7. So back to where we started, where in the key of G we have these two anchor fingers, that C add 9, a D, and an E minor. If you're asked to play a D over F sharp there, that's how I would do it without the thumb. I just go. That wasn't the chord I meant to play there, but I do not think I'm going to redo this video that is currently 18 minutes long just because I played a bad chord at the very end of it. So that's the end. I hope that helps.